We want to begin tonight's program with Rodney Dillard by introducing KSMU's award-winning news director, Mike Smith, who will be interviewing Rodney. Mike has been bringing us the latest news on KSMU Public Radio for over 40 years, and you have surely heard his Saturday night bluegrass music show called Seldom Heard Music on KSMU. Mike is an Ozarks legend in broadcasting and music appreciation. So please make welcome Mike Smith.
Hey! Thank you very much. Thanks, Kitty, for that fine introduction. I appreciate it, and appreciate you all being here. One thing that she wasn't in her notes that I will ask for a few volunteers after we're done tonight to help us put up chairs and tables, and I'd appreciate that help very, very much. Well, we are here on a very special night. An old friend of mine here with us. His name is Rodney Dillard. And Rodney, just to remind our listeners, okay, I'm looking at Missouri Music Hall of Fame member, Bill Monroe Bluegrass Hall of Fame member, Country Music Hall of Fame member, and IBMA, International Bluegrass Music Association Hall of Fame member. He received his honorary doctorate degree at Missouri State University, doctorate in public affairs, here a few weeks ago at graduation ceremonies. You may know him as a member of the Darling family on the Andy Griffith Show, which he did 6 episodes of. 6.
How about the movie?
Please welcome Rodney Dillard. And not only the 6 episodes, but the movie, Return to Mayberry, which came out, I forgot what year. What year was that?
I don't know, I have to talk to my brain sitting out there.
Let's get your mic up.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Well, it's time to tense up because the red light's on. So I'm going to do that. You know, I'm sitting up here. It's amazing. I know a lot of you folks, don't I? Is there anybody, raise your hand if I don't know you. Well, how do you know me if I don't know? Now, I was coming down the street one day, and this guy come up and said, "Haven't I seen you on TV?" And I said, "How would I know?" But it's good to see a lot of you guys out there that I don't. One of my favorite singers, maybe the best singer, and is Carrie Cole, sitting right there, who goes out with Tony on Night of the Lefties. And one of the most creative people in Springfield is Nick Sibley, sitting right next to him. If you heard a commercial, he probably wrote it, played it in this town. Okay, that's all I have to say.
Also in the audience tonight, banjo legend.
Yes.
Mr.
Alan Mundy.
Alan Mundy. We're trying to get Alan, we're going to make sure Alan gets nominated to the IBMA Hall of Fame as soon as we can also.
I had some stories on Alan I was going to tell later.
All right. Let's talk about your stories, Rodney. Specifically, let's start off chronologically. In the late 50s and early 60s.
Are these your notes?
These are my notes.
Let's wing it.
You played in Springfield, you played in Salem, you played in St. Louis. What was the music scene like for Missouri in the late 50s for you?
In the late 50s, I was still in high school when
Well,
yeah. Yeah, it was, there wasn't, well, there
Same
was.
high school, by the way.
My brother and I'm from Dent County, Missouri, of course. That's, you know where Dent County is? Is that where you're from Salem? Staleville, huh? How they let you out? Huh? Oh, but we were kids. It started out after I was born. My dad was an old-time fiddle player, and my mother played guitar, and so I grew up. Music was just a part of my life, you know, just like anything else for us. And as I grew up and grew older, and people would come over and play and different things, I ended up getting interested somehow. And with the old-time fiddle things and all of that stuff, I got a trumpet. And I was playing the trumpet. And in grade school, I was playing first chair in high school because they only had 3 or 4 band members, so I was kind of cheating a little bit. But my dad just loved to play, and he bought my brother a banjo. a K banjo. And Doug started playing the banjo, learning how to play green corn and all those things you do. It's just the growth. But I can remember my mother sitting her guitar behind the couch and saying to my brother and I, "Don't you guys touch that."
Wow.
And that's how we learned to play. But as we came along, Doug got better and better on the banjo, and at that time, my dad bought me a Silvertone guitar from Sears, and we started picking. He wanted a band to back him up, and we played all these little square dances in places, the skull orchards, places where you wouldn't take a kid if you wouldn't have a reason, to play music, and that just started growing and growing. And my brother played a banjo with no finger picks, and he would play till his fingers bled. That's how the passion that he had for what he did. And I remember the first time he came back, he was going to school in St. Louis. I'm jumping ahead, but he had found finger picks. And when he came into the room at 3 in the morning, and they came down, Mom and Dad from St. Louis, he started playing, and it sounded like a whole orchestra to me. I couldn't believe how big a sound a banjo could make. Yeah. And so that's really when we got started. We started playing, and then different people would come along, and we'd pick, and along the line, we met John Hartford, because he lived in St. Louis. His dad was a ear, nose, and throat specialist.
Now, your dad worked up in St. Louis,
Yes, he did.
kept a place up there while you still had the house in Salem on the West Plains Road.
Yes, he did. Yeah, on West Plains Road. It's still there.
Yep.
And a fellow looking for keeping it safe and everything. But anyway, we had John. We just started picking, and that's all we did. We played, and I would drive up when I was 16, and we'd just pick anywhere we could. And that's how that all started. Doug and I made our first record in Belleville, Illinois, for a record company called Marlowe Records. And we cut a song called Banjo and a Holla. And then I forgot what the other side was, but boy, that really got the bug to do it, right? Jump cut into, I got out of high school, and for some reason I ended up at Southern Illinois University, and hated it. I didn't fit in. I just didn't, all this protocol and all this stuff was going on, all this intellectual stuff, And I called my brother. I said, "Doug, we got to do something with the music. We got to get out of here, I can't shoot craps on, for the rest of the summer to pay my gas bill." And so Douglas says, "Wait, he was working then." He said, "I'll quit my job. We'll just go." Well, during that time, we met. Is this interesting, you guys, at all? Yes. During that time, we met a DJ in Salem, Missouri. He came, he was from Nebraska or Iowa, or some of those.
Indiana.
Mitch? Yeah.
He was born in Hammond, Indiana.
Well, you just tell the rest of it. So he first he started playing. He didn't like bluegrass when he first came to town. He was playing Prokofiev and all that stuff. But he was trying to be like an FM DJ that like KSM.
Yeah, well,
all those.
That was KSMO.
Yeah.
In Salem, Missouri. I worked there as well in the early 70s.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Boy, I'm glad I wasn't there.
You know that.
Yeah, I did. I know.
And of course, now I work for KSMU, so it's easy for me to remember.
Well, yeah. Well, Mitch started out like the public radio people. Like they always talk like, "I'm a very smart person, and I can tell you everything you know about what you need to know. This is FFFW KOLD, no Molesca." They all sound the same. They've got that thing going. They steal each other's anointing. But so anyway, Mitch got interested because there was a guy by the name of Hal Teague who'd come into town and play on the radio, on every Saturday. Hal Teague would come in. He played old-time fiddle, and he had guys, on the take-off guitar, And Doug would go in and play, and we ended up doing some things on the radio with Mitch, and then we started hanging out with Mitch, going out to his house and playing, and he got into the music really heavy. And I remember when I was in high school, he wanted to learn to play the banjo. And he said, I'll trade you this boxer dog that I have if you'll teach me how to play the banjo. Because I was, osmosis I learned from Doug. And so I said, okay, I want the dog. And so I traded him. I taught him a little banjo, and I took that dog home, and it tried to eat my horse and a couple of the neighbors' cows. So I got the wrong end of the deal on that one. But after I heard Mitch play the banjo, I thought we were even.
And how did you meet Dean Webb?
I'll get to that.
Well, look at the time.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll jump ahead then. So Dean was hanging around there was the Ozark Opry up in Lake the Ozarks, Lee Mace's Ozark Opry, and we'd see him on, every Friday night on TV. And Doug and I went up there because we knew Dale Sled, who was picking for Lee Mace. And through Dale Sled, we met Dean Webb. And Doug and I were really getting into this music thing. We'd done a couple of local recordings, and we cut an album in St. Louis with a guy who went on to San Francisco and became one of those, Grateful Dead dudes or something, and in that culture. And so Dean and I and Doug started playing, and that's when I called Doug and said, let's get out of here. So Doug said, let's go. Well, Mitch had been playing this. He said, wait, I'll quit my job, sell my house, and I'll go with you. Poor Mitch, he didn't.
Well, let's talk about that trip. The decision to leave Salem, go to Los Angeles instead of Nashville. What drove you to L.A. instead of Music City?
Good question.
It's right here.
During that period of time, like all music gets to the point where it can sometimes be so much of the sameness, it crushes under its own weight, like pop music. And country music was all saying, it was the same thing, kick off, you could just put it in the other, and that is not something we wanted to do. And Nashville treated bluegrass like the unwanted stepchild because they would play it on the radio during furniture commercials. They play out, and welcome to Bob's Furniture, and that isn't something that we wanted to be part of. So it so happened that Mitch's sister worked for a man, the David Wolper Productions. I don't know if you guys remember that major production company in LA. They were doing all the documentaries and stuff. And she worked with, and she found out that we were going to come out, so she said, let me get you a manager. And they did. They got us a manager before we ever left home. And and so we decided to leave. So we started staying at Mitch's house because none of us had a job. And we were staying at Mitch's farmhouse out there, and we got really hungry, and Mitch would go out and say, I'm going to go hunt and we'll get us a wild turkey. And I know the difference between a wild turkey and a tame turkey. And I was in fear of the neighbors because he'd bring home this turkey that certainly wasn't a wild turkey. But I'll jump ahead. We sold out. We'd gotten Dean's 55 Cadillac and a one-wheel trailer and headed for California. We didn't have very much money. I think we had maybe $150 really between all of us. And we weren't used to large sums of money like that. We went through it in a week. But we got as far as Oklahoma City. We were sleeping in the Cadillac in those dusty oil fields. And we take turns sleeping because it had that transmission hump in the back of sleeping in the floor there because that was tough sleeping there. And we went to the YMCA, checked in 2 of us, and snuck the other 2 in.
Kind of like that Mayberry episode.
Hey. Well, we got in there, and we had to wire the beds together so we could all 4 sleep in the 2 beds. And we had the end of the hall in the room that controlled the thermostat. And Dean liked to sleep in cold weather where you could hang meat. He didn't care if it was winter or not. And he'd turn that thermostat down, and the next thing you know, people be pounding on the door, turn up the thermostat, turn up. And, well, at the time, it was funny.
Tell them how you taught Mitch some bass licks on the road.
Yeah, we had the 55 Cadillac. It was all laid back like this with the bass. We didn't put it on the roof because didn't want to get wet or anything. And so everybody, Dean and I was showing him some licks in the bass, and he was learning to play the bass as we were headed for California, like this.
Lying down next to the bass.
Yeah. You know, when we got out there, it took 2 months for him to learn to play it standing up. Really. But the thing is, I'll cut to the chase. We went to California, pulled in there. I've never seen anything like it in my life. And we checked into the Melrose Motel, which was rented by the hour. And we didn't have a lot of money then. But anyway, we went to the Ash Grove, which was now the Comedy Store, because we knew about the Ash Grove, and we walked in with our instruments. And at the time, I'm not sure who was playing. One of the biggies, you know, the folkies, or maybe it was Johnny Cash, I can't remember. And we walked into the lobby there and just started playing. And the guy came out and said, "You can't do this here." He said, "Do it on stage." Ed Pearl. And that's how it kicked off. That night, people who represented Jack Holzman's company at the time, Elektra Records, and a producer who put together the Byrds, started with the Eagles. He got the Eagles and a lot of people he produced. And he said, you know, "Do you want to make a record deal?" I said, "What's it going to cost us?" He said, "No, we'll take care of that." So we signed with Elektra Records. Now, this happened like in 2 weeks. And we ended up staying at the time, Bud and Travis, they were a big folk duo at the time. They were really hot and doing a lot of things. So we stayed at Travis Edmondson's house, which was about 2 blocks from the Troubadour. And right in the middle there were Scandia Restaurant and all that was. But where was it?
Troubadour.
Troubadour. No. Oh, so they put a... No, they put we signed with William Morris, the biggest agency. And now, this is crazy. Nobody does this. You're there a week and you sign with William Morris, you sign a major record deal, and then you get a call from the Andy Griffith Show.
Well, there was an article in Variety magazine that the record company had hired these folks from Salem, Missouri, and that caught the attention of Andy Griffith's people.
Yes, he had a script there called "The Darlings Are Coming," and he signed these guys from the Ozarks who play this bluegrass music, and he said, "Send them over. I want to see what they sound like." So here we go, after about a week there, walking into Desilu Studios, and all the major stars then had, you know, there's Joey Bishop. You folks, some of you are old enough to remember Joe Bishop's show, and
yes.
Dick Van Dyke. Thank you, honey. And so we walked in, and they were shooting an episode where Don Knotts was. They were trying to figure out who was singing off in the choir. And he and Bob Sweeney were shooting this episode, and Bob was the producer. We walked in and Andy said, "Okay, boys, show us what you got." And they pulled up in a couple folding chairs. We stood in front of them right there, and we lit into a song. I forgot what it was. Got halfway through it, and Andy went, "That's it." And I turned to Douglas and said, "Oh, they're kicking us out. What are we going to do?" Started to walk out. He says, "Where you going, boys? You got the job."
Yeah.
Well, we were only supposed to do 1 episode, but they had so much response for that we did 6 episodes. We did 1 a year because we got pretty, what they call in L.A. hot at that time. We started doing other shows and college concerts, and we were moving into an area that nobody had ever been before. They didn't know what to do with us out there. How do you market these guys? What are they playing? Who are they? You know, and Hollywood is always looking for the next big thing. You know, so they thought maybe, boy, were they mistaken that it was us. But
that audition tune was Reuben's Train, if I recall.
Yep.
You're so smart.
Yeah.
Will you loan me your brain?
Yeah. Mom always liked you best.
Oh, gosh. So anyway, we signed to do other shows. We were out playing the East Coast in New York, as a matter of fact, playing the bottom, one of those clubs out there. Everybody played Dylan, and that's where I met Bob Benton. That's another story. But and we had a jam one night, Dylan and I and Doug. But where was I? Oh, yeah.
Newport Folk Festival.
Yeah, we were playing the Newport Folk Festival. Yeah, we got a call that said, sorry, but George Slaughter, who was producing the shows, they want you to come back and sign to do 7 Judy Garland specials because she was doing the show. And so we said, nah. No, we didn't. We went went right back out to California and did the first Judy Garland show. And it was such a rough go. That was the second introduction to Hollywood, which if it had been my first, I would have turned tail and run home.
It kind of made you mad, didn't it?
Well, it wasn't like the Andy Griffith show where everybody just made you feel comfortable. There was no ego problems. It was just beautiful. We had so much fun. We stayed friends, that cast, over the years.
But they had you on the Judy Garland show wearing tuxedos barefoot in performance.
If I would have been if I had known then what I knew a few years later, I wouldn't have done it. But we did it. We did it and moved on to other things. And the rest is just boring history. We made records and
we're going to bore you more here tonight.
And made records and we did 5 pilots for television.
Wow.
None of them, they all failed. We did one with Linda Ronstadt and Hank Williams Jr. for MGM. Did one for Gene Autry. Did one for Dick Clark called Another Day, Another Dillard. And we worked with Dick for 3 or 4 months on that, just he and I and Mitch writing this thing. And then, what else did we do?
Well, when you were at Andy, what was it like working with Don Knotts? And especially, I'd like to know about your relationship with Howard Morris, who directed some of those shows, also was a cast member on the Show of Shows with Sid Caesar, but of course was known by the Andy fans as Ernest T. Bass. What kind of guy is he?
He was a very creative, talented man. He was like your aunt's Pekingese on a Sunday afternoon. Getting on your leg and your aunt says, "Oh, he likes you."
Well, that's
Howard Morris was the same man. The clothes were just different. You go out on the street, he was the same kind of energetic guy, who could get himself in real trouble. He never stopped,
I admired that guy so much.
He had quadruple bypass surgery when we did the movie. And they had, remember in Pig on the Piano he was dancing to? They did several scenes of that, and I don't know how he did it. He married the same woman 4 times, didn't he, honey?
Yep.
Yeah, he married his wife 4 times. Wow. And I think he was celebrating. I think he just liked the routine, got him going. That was Howard.
Yeah.
And very, very funny guy. Very funny guy.
That's some pure TV history right there, even before Andy, of course, with Sid Caesar and the gang. Okay, you mentioned Judy Garland show. What other television programs have you appeared on? We're going to get to the movies that Rodney's been involved with as well. But Playboy After Dark, can you imagine? The Dillards on Playboy After Dark?
I saw that.
You did. I'm sorry. It's amazing what you do.
Barbie Barbie Benton.
Why are you pointing at me?
You were there. I saw it.
We started doing a lot of television. Then we did, first we did the Tennessee Ernie Ford show. Then we guest hosted when he had his daytime show in San Francisco. We were on a week when we were playing The Hungry Eye up there. We got hot there for a while, didn't we?
Yes.
And then,
Don Knotts.
yeah, we did 3 of Don Knotts specials. With one special we did with Bob Newhart and Gina Lola Brigida.
Ooh.
Nah.
Let's get back to Barbie Benton.
Well, that was such, and I can say this now, because is he dead yet?
Yeah.
Huh?
Hugh?
Yeah.
Hugh?
Oh, good, I can talk. That was the most pretentious show. I hated doing that show. So Herb and I, when the dancers got up there, I knew a couple of the dancers, but when they got up and started dancing, they were doing all that phony stuff, and he was asking all those stupid questions. Herb looked at me, and we were playing, I don't forget the second one, and I said, they were trying to dance to it, and Herb looked at me, and he started speeding it up. He looked at me again, like Herb does, and he started speeding it up. So we played it about as fast as we could. Those people just couldn't do anything. You know, they look ridiculous, really. They cut some of that out, but that was the way Herb and I kind of approached all that stuff.
While all this was going on, you were a major influence on several folks, several bands, and several individuals that we all know about. I mean, we're a bunch of gray hairs for the most part here tonight. And the Byrds, a big influence on the Byrds, Buffalo Springfield, the Eagles. His latest album, Don Henley helps sing and play on that album. Old Road New Again, released in 2020 by Pinecastle Records. And Rodney was gracious to allow me to introduce that to the nation on Seldom Heard Music on KSMU.
Yeah, the Bluegrass stations looked at that album like Superman did Kryptonite.
Well, I appreciate it.
Well, it did
very much.
Europe, it did very well, and some of the indie stations that play the kind of music that you do on public radio.
Let me throw out some quotes here from some folks. Don Henley, speaking of him, Dillards were probably more of an influence on me than anybody else but the Beatles and the Byrds.
Wow.
And it's interesting because the Dillards were before the Byrds, and the Byrds were influenced by the Dillards.
How'd that happen?
And he said he drove through a snowstorm for 2 hours to get to one of your concerts.
Yeah, in Texas.
Yeah. John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin. In 1970, someone gave me a copy of Back Porch Bluegrass, their first album, 1963 Electra, and I never really recovered. So I went out and bought myself a mandolin.
Yeah, I did.
Led Zeppelin. John McEwen with the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, one of your oldest friends. Without the Dillards, there wouldn't have been a Nitty Gritty Dirt Band or a Will the Circle Be Unbroken album. That's high praise. And, And speaking of John McEwen, his good friend and co-worker at Disneyland, Mr. Steve Martin, John McEwen and Steve Martin would travel regularly to whatever nightclub the Dillards were performing and watched and listened to your band reverently.
We played West L.A. at some place out there, and Steve was our opening act. And he did his,
But as a kid, as a teenager, McEwen and Steve Martin both worked in the magic shop at Disneyland. And then on their off time, they would find that time to head up and catch these guys, you know.
Boy, I've really been blessed, you know that? I really have. I'm going to get emotional here in a minute.
You influenced me.
Well, I'll take that back.
And let me add one more here. And this is after the recording of Wheat Straw Suite, which I want to talk about as well. I think, who remembers the Rolling Stone ratings? Did they give stars? Was it 5 stars or whatever? 5 stars for Wheat Straw Suite, 1968. And Elton John says that album was one of his all-time favorites, and the first thing he did when he came to America was go see the Dillards. And then they toured together.
Well, we had just come out with the album Roots and Branches, which was produced by a producer who produced Three Dog Night, Steppenwolf, Blues Image. I could go on. He produced all these people. And we came out with the record on United Artists. And I remember we were on stage at the Troubadour, and this fellow said, I've seen him on an album cover somewhere. Yeah. And he came back again. So I said, that's Elton John. I said, hi. But, yeah, that was a wonderful tour. That's the only album that ever hit the charts all at once, pop charts. There was that tour with Elton, and that's what made that work.
We toured all around the country with Elton John.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
And he admired you guys so much.
He was a gentleman. He would come out on our show at the very end and sing Somebody Touched Me with us.
Oh.
Yeah, he was cool.
Okay, other bands that might have been that were influenced by the Dillards, the Flying Burrito Brothers. Y'all remember them? This guy here played in that band. Alan Mundy was a member of the Burrito Brothers.
Was Eddie Ponderblunt playing drums for you guys then? Because he played drums for us.
No.
Who was playing drums? Do you remember, Alan?
I do remember. His name was Eric Dalton.
Eric
Really?
Dalton.
Eric Dalton. Okay. Herb Peterson played with the Burritos. You guys went to Europe with Herb, didn't you? Am I putting you on the spot?
Yeah, that's another story.
Okay.
Another story, Alan says.
Oh, there's so many stories, Alan. But
Yeah, 1968, a pivotal year for your band. Your brother left the group, but Herb Peterson came in, and that album just wowed everybody, and you were so innovative, and you changed the way that listeners dealt with bluegrass music, electrification, drums, all that stuff. And again, the top review from Rolling Stone. It was a great album, and Herb Peterson is a great musician. You know.
yeah, that's another story there. It's really, I had decided I was going to do one more record, then I was going to do something else, and I'd been offered a couple of to join a couple of rock guys. Well, one, they were very popular at the time, but I didn't. So we did this album. I worked that all out in my back room, and I had a Revox sound-on-sound recorder. And I thought, what would be? I want an environmental record, not just Red Mountain Squirrel. Where are you now? I didn't want to do that sort of thing. Or my baby's gone, so I'm going to break this beer bottle over the counter. I didn't want to express myself like, unrequited love stuff. So I worked on that. And in the middle of that, what happened was there was a guy who was wanting to work, a friend of mine who produced a group you probably have heard of called the Monkees and the Turtles. Happy Together was one of his. But anyway, Chip was working with me, and that wasn't working out. Douglas decided he wanted to just play banjo because I was bringing in a 20-piece orchestra, harp, all kinds of stuff, octave of chickens with a ping pong paddle. And we parted ways. Doug wanted to do something else, so I said, okay. And Dean said, well, do you remember that banjo player from up in San Francisco, Herb Peterson? I said, yeah, he was really good. He said, well, let's call him. I said, okay, call him. He called him up, and I said, ask him to play Train 45 over the phone. And he did, and he got halfway through. I said, tell him, he was in Nashville at the time. He was actually servicing vending machines. And he'd sub for Earl when Earl was sick with his back. So he came out, and that's when it started. Herb came into it, and with his harmonies and stuff, we took it to another level back then, and that's when, those other boys said, oh, we can do this too. Yeah. And I got to tell this. After Herb and I did an album together not too long ago, I sold my beautiful Guild electric guitar to Steve Stills because they didn't have anything. He says, well, we'll pay you for it later. We don't have any money right now. And so I sold him this guitar, and he never paid me for it. It gets funnier. I'm in L.A. doing a mix down on the vocals with Herb that we did on one of my albums, and in this door, he came in the door, big guy, because it was backlit, and I couldn't see who it was coming down the hall. I said, hey, Dillard. I said, yeah. I said, Still's here. I said, hey, Steve, what are you doing? He says, well, I'm cutting right next door. Come over and hear what I'm doing. And I said, okay. We're walking down the hall. He said, I never paid you for that guitar, did I? I said, no. He said, well, come on in and let's listen to this. So I saw a picture of Neil Young holding my guitar on the YouTube, and it says, this is a guitar we borrowed from Rodney Dillard.
And never gave back. I'm going to throw out another name. We talked about the Byrds earlier, and Dean Webb, the mandolinist with the Dillards, tell him about Tambourine Man.
Well,
You know the song, right?
yeah. I was out, Herb and somebody, we were out doing something. Jim Dixon was trying to get a hold of him, and he couldn't. He called Dean, and he said, these guys are, they can't do harmonies. And they're out fighting among them. The Byrds were another story. But they were, arguing among themselves, trying to figure this out. He says, could you come down and put the harmonies on for them, and then they can copy them? So Dean went down and put all 3 parts on for him, and they copied the parts. So that's how Tamarine Man Harmony came about.
There you go.
Yeah, it's like I wrote a commercial called Things Go Better with Orange Crush. Never quite there.
Now, let's go back. I talked about 1968, but let's go back a year, maybe 2. The film Bonnie and Clyde. Warren Beatty, Faye Dunaway. The soundtrack was Rodney, Doug, Glenn Campbell, and the orchestra.
Tommy Tedesco on the orchestra.
Yeah.
Tommy Tedesco was the big player back. You guys knew Tommy Tedesco. Huh? Oh yeah,
Glenn
he
was,
played
yeah,
on everything.
absolutely.
He played.
Right.
There was Douglas played a thing called Train Whistle Stop for Mike Nesbitt, and they did this whole orchestra thing. And so Tommy Tedesco, I'm going to tell a side story.
Sure.
Tommy, great player. They would put the paper. One time they put the paper upside down that you read, and he just read it, didn't even pick it up and turn it over. He was, but anyway, you hear this orchestra going on big, and then you hear lunch break, and Tedesco takes his electric guitar and tosses it in the air, and he goes cream bang 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 bang, and this is during a monkey session, right? That's Hollywood.
Well,
Yeah.
as you know, the main theme was Earl Scruggs' Foggy Mountain Breakdown, the main chase theme, I guess. And Warren Beatty could have had Earl Scruggs come in for that, but he instead chose to put on the soundtrack. Whenever you hear the Foggy Mountain Breakdown in that film, it's the original 45 RPM that Earl did. Warren Beatty wanted that sound of the 45 RPM.
But he didn't know what he wanted.
Yeah.
And this is where I come in.
Yeah. Dr. Rodney Dillard.
We're in the middle of this orchestra, and we're at Warner Brothers, and they throw up a work print, and this European conductor that they paid buku amounts of money are conducting, and we were called the legitimate band. And we're sitting here with a stack of music like this that neither Glenn Campbell and I could read, and we're playing this thing. They had this funky tenor banjo guy playing with us, which was just destroying it. It's like two skeletons fighting in a closet. It's just racka, 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 racka. And I felt this tug in my leg in the middle of the orchestra, and it's Warren Beatty. He says, what's going on here? What's this? This is not right. I said, and I was really pushing for Douglas and I and Glenn to do it, right? Go in the studio and cut a bluegrass. I said, what you need here is a bluegrass, a legitimate bluegrass chase scene, because that's what that era was about. I said, And later, after a week, we went ahead and played with the legitimate orchestra. I had a solo on there at the end called Who's Snoring Now? And I couldn't read music, and I had to take it to Tedesco really quick and say, how's this go? How's this go? And I learned it and learned it and learned it. Then I played it like I was reading it. I fooled him again. So we pull up. There's a special showing he was showing in one of the theaters, in one of the big night with the red carpet. But I pull up, put my quarter in the parking meter, and Beatty comes out. And he says, you know what I did? He said, I got an old recording of Flatt & Scruggs. He said, it works great. Another Things Go Better with Orange Crush for me.
Let's go to another film.
I'm getting depressed.
Hollywood. 1979, The Rose with Bette Midler and Harry Dean Stanton. And your brother Doug, I know you guys were very good friends with Harry Dean Stanton.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Harry was... I babysat his house up in the hills when he went. He said, well, Dillard, I got this call. They want me to come to England and do this movie called Aliens. He says, I don't know if it's going to be a piece of junk or what. He says, but I'll be back in a couple of months. Aliens. He was the one that said, here, kitty, 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 in the Hawaiian shirt. He says, what? I got to cut that kitty crap. That was his line in the movie. Anyway, where was we?
The Rose with Bette Midler.
It was just one of those happenstance, do something for a friend. Harry's out there, and he loved to pick and sing, and he loved to pick with Doug and I, as Beverly can attest to that when we got out there. Remember? Knocked on his door.
Yeah, we knocked on his door and he opened with a guitar singing.
We jumped in and did the harmony.
Yeah, we jumped in.
But anyway, Harry called me, he said, I'm doing a movie out here in Valencia, and he said, would you come and be part of the band? And I said, well, it's not too far. Yeah, I've never done anything like that. So we went out there, and it was Doug and I and Byron Berline. We played Harry's band, right, Harry Dean's band. And that was all an interesting thing to work with Bette Midler on that. But she had all our Dillard albums. I couldn't believe that. But, well, that's that story. There's not much to that.
Well, it was a great appearance.
It was-
I'm looking at the movie at the Northtown Mall up there when they had a theater, and all of a sudden here pops up Rodney, Doug, and
Byron.
Berline. And I go, oh, man,
It's just something fun to do, you know. When,
made me scream out loud. It did. Your brother was in Robert Altman's Popeye.
Yeah. Doug was in the Popeye because he was good friends with Harry Nilsson, who wrote the Popeye music, and so Harry had him over there in the movie, like again, friends, you know. For a Christmas present, Harry Nilsson gave Douglas a Warner Brothers record contract with the tracks already cut. Hooray for Hollywood!
Douglas also did some music for the cult classic now. It's called Vanishing Point. Mm-hmm. Familiar with that one? Douglas did some of that music.
He did a lot of movie music while he was out there. Commercials. He did some on-camera commercials too while he was there. I did too. So.
And your dad, Homer Dillard, won the Gong Show with Chuck Barris.
Chuck Barris was a Dillard fan because I went on to do another. He had another show called the Rah Rah Show on CBS, and we did that show. And he was a big Dillard fan, so that all worked out good in my dad's favor. I would hate for him to lose that, but he was so proud of that. He won.
J.P. Morgan wanted his dad.
J.P. Morgan was wanting.
Okay, gosh, we talked about a lot here. August 1979, the family reunion concert at the Sinks, not too far before it dumps into the Current River. I shouldn't say dumps. Not too far before it goes into the Current River
that's
there.
Where the Blue Hole is, the Sinks, yeah.
Yep, and what a great time that was. Two concerts, Friday and Saturday night concerts at the Sinks in August of 79. And the mayor, Louis Roberts of Salem, Missouri, proclaimed August 8th as Dillard Day in Salem. And at the time, actually, the mayor was under a federal investigation.
That's right. That's absolutely true. I was waiting for you to drop the shoe. Things go better with orange. Crush.
Yes. He was using federal funds that were meant for the city on his house and other things like that.
Yeah, he's following the big guys.
But the best thing he did was proclaim Dillard Day on August 8th, 1979. Tell us about your gig at Silver Dollar City. You were basically an artist in residence there, weren't you?
Yeah. Yeah, I was. Someone came to me and said, it was like laughing when the German peeks through the bushes and goes, psst. And it was the CEO of the company going, psst. He said, hey, Dillard, he said, we want to talk to you about putting a show in the amphitheater. Well, it turns out that show evidently wasn't very successful because it was very disparaging to the way the plot was to the city. You know, it wasn't very kind. The mayor was a drunk, and you know.
And it took so long to walk down to get your seat at that amphitheater.
Well, let me tell you,
straight down.
It was. I'm going to tell you just like it is. You know, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. "Oh, it's okay, honey. I'm not going to embarrass you."
Oh, look at that face.
They came to me and said, "Could you put a show in the amphitheater?" And I said, "Yeah." I didn't know if I could or not. And I wanted to raise our son. I got him out of Hollywood in time before he got big enough to be influenced. But by the way, now he's a captain in the Sullivan County, Bristol, Tennessee, Tri-Cities area in the Sheriff's Department. He's a pilot. He's a videographer, and he is a musician. And now he has his own company, which they've started, and it's doing quite well. But I got him. I raised him 48 hours a week, my wife and I. That's what you do with a kid like that. And, well, they asked me if I could do it. I said, okay. I put together a little show for the Gaslight with the people that were there. Because I would see these people and see, well, this talent needs to be brought out, this talent. And the comedian, which everybody ignored, said he'd be great. So we got Jack McDowell, I did as a comedian for that show, because back then everybody had to have a comic, right? And kind of like burlesque, right? You know, burlesque comics. So we put this show together down there. I tell you, middle management really fought me on that. You can't do a show down there, blah, 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 blah. But it lasted 8 years.
Wow.
So it was very interesting working for a corporation. Not many of them understand what communication is. I used to call it outshot side shows, where you go da 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 da, and you focus at the back of the room, da, 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 and you're not connecting. You're not looking at people's faces. There's no synergy there, and you're not. And that had to be broken, and I had to fight to do that. My wife and I wrote the shows every year. Every year we wrote shows, and
Had to be new every year.
yeah, it had to be New Year. The thing is they say, okay, we would like to have the script for the show right after the other one. I said, nah. And they got desperate because they were following corporate protocol. Gives me shivers. Corporate protocol, you got to have the. I said, no, you're not going to get it. Nope, I'm not sure what it's going to be. And I drove the CEO crazy with that. All of them, you know. You go with your legal tablets and sit in the room and say, "What do you got, Dillard?" Nothing. But it was successful enough they knew they weren't going to mess with me. So one time I brought in a yellow pad, and I think I had a grocery list on it or something. And I was sitting there with the CEO, and he says, "Is that the notes for the show?" I said, "Yeah." And he went, "Celery, onions, potatoes." Yeah, I don't think upper management liked me very well there, but it was a good thing. I got to meet a lot of people, and got to do things that no one else had really done. Is make you, when you left there, you felt better, and that's my whole thing. What I've done is to make people feel better and feel like, you know, there's hope. And the music and everything has always been like that, and the humor, because it's like the Andy Griffith Show. I think it's really important that we all are able to touch. It's like sitting in front of a fire, in a campfire, you know, that feeling you get, that ancient thing that comes up and you get, you know, comfortable with it, unless you hear a Bigfoot growl. But that's what I try to do with that show, and we did it till I couldn't handle it anymore. And I said, I got to get out of here. So I left.
We're going to take some questions from the audience here, but I want to line some stuff up here. By my count, 17 albums from 1963 to 2020, Back Porch Bluegrass to Old Road New Again, 8 compilation albums from 1976 to 2005, 15 singles from 63 to 1977. And at least 33 members of the Dillards since the band started. So,
where are the royalties for all those records?
right.
We have about 4 minutes now, and
Oh, I'm sorry, I talk too much.
no,
We can
you
stretch
never
it out.
talk too much. We just don't have enough time.
Okay. Questions?
We can have a little more than minutes.
Okay, you can edit, right?
Randall,
And
you
I
have a
will,
question?
if it's okay with you, I will repeat the question for the audio on the camera. So if we.
Two questions, real quick. First, how many gigs are you going to do this year?
Second, when are we going fishing?
You heard that? How many gigs are you going to do this year, and when are you going to go fishing?
We could go fishing anytime.
Okay.
How many are we going to do this year? Huh?
Well, so far it's about 5, because he only does things like that he thinks is going to be fun. Because we don't have to do it, so he says, that looks like fun, okay. And so far, 5 things look like fun, including the Opry.
Yeah, we're doing the Grand Ole Opry on July 14th again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, Beverly, would you please stand up?
This is
Beverly's dealing with a bum knee tonight.
I met her in Canada at a international festival up there, and yeah, that's where I first met her up there. Then I went and sat in Jello. She impressed me so much. I actually did.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I talked to you earlier. Explain to me, that show, Andy Griffith, I watch it all the time. I grew up on that show. What I meant by you influencing me, that's when I saw that Bluegrass, I went, oh, this is wonderful. But you always had this straight, just distant look all the time. And I had to ask you, and you said bring it up. Were you acting, or was that just they told you to be dumb? But it was just this great, because you just walked around, and even when you played guitar, I was going, wow, what? He's just there.
Yeah, well, I was using the Stanislavski method of acting. No, but Sweeney said, you guys just look, just look stoic, just stoic. So I knew what that was about, because I have relatives, when you go and visit, they just sit there in the chair and go, you know what I'm talking about?
Well, he was also paid,
said-
they were paid as musicians, not as actors, and that's why they didn't have lines.
That's right. And there's a thing I probably should tell, because it makes Andy look really good, because he was.
Yeah.
He came up and says, now, boys, you're not going to make any money as act. We were paying $300 a piece per show as musicians. Right. We didn't know. And he says, but I'll get as many of your songs that you write on the show. And that's an old other deal, isn't it, Nick? ASCAP.
The gift
Yeah.
that keeps on.
The gift that keeps on giving. So 60 some odd years, we had an average of 5 songs per show. And so Andy was very good to us. He could have just used boiling cabbage down and just traditional PD stuff that you didn't have to pay on. But that's what Andy did for us.
On that, we are running out of time.
Somebody had a question.
One question back here in the blue shirt.
okay.
Right.
John.
Taking off of the Silver Dollar City experience, my dad told me in late 70s, early 80s, he said, Silver Dollar City's going to have a record label, and Rodney Dillard's going to run it for us. And I've never heard any more about it.
Well, there was a friend of mine, a producer by the name of Bob Millsap. And Bob Millsap was a writer. He wrote some hits for George Jones, and he published a tune. What was that tune?
You needed me.
You Needed Me. So, Anne Murray. So he encouraged Anne Murray to do that. But he built the studio, and we became good friends, and we do demos, and we became really close friends. And he said, well, let's start a record label with Silver Dollar City. So we hired a guy who was with Roy Clark's bunch of that agency. Was it Churchill Records? We hired him to be the promo guy, and we produced a record with Pat Boone, and one with Tommy Overstreet and Roy Clark, and then that all fell apart. It didn't happen for several different reasons. It just didn't work. There was a transition at the time, and so I got all the masters back.
I'd like to
Silver Dollar City's wondering.
Sorry to interrupt you. I'd like to remind you, Rodney has graciously allowed autographs to be signed by himself tonight, and the merch table by the Dillards is back in the back room there, and Beverly will make her way there too to offer you some of those albums. And if any of you have any memorabilia or purchase something from the table you'd like to have autographed, Rodney said he'd do it. So
I got
very
a
much.
49 Hudson transmission back there too.
So we very much appreciate your presence here, and of course this guy, Dr. Rodney Dillard, for being here tonight.